Hello, everybody. Welcome to our next presentation. In this presentation, we are going to be reading Salvador Late or Early. So let me just remind you that if you have not done the voice thread that's called Reading the Invisible, Introduction to Inference, you need to go and do that first. This is a practice of using inference. So if you don't know what happened in that presentation in the voice thread and you haven't practiced that yet, you need to do that first. I would also encourage you to do your study read for chapter 7 before you do this, just because that will give you a little bit more background knowledge in how inferences work, and that will help you do this. So go do those two things first. You can just pause this recording and come back. Okay? All right. So we are going to be reading Salvador Late or Early. It is by Sandra Cisneros, and she wrote this short story. It's like 3 paragraphs long, and it's in her book, Woman Coloring Creek and Other Stories. It's a beautiful little essay. And so if you haven't printed it out yet, there are 2 different things to print. There is the essay, which is right here, right? And then there are 2 pages of questions. And I would print both if you can. If you can't, that's fine. You can have it up in your computer. But what I would encourage you to do if you can't print these out is I would have your notebook open, so you will be able to at least write down things as we go. So make sure to have your essay up on your computer if you can't print it, and then you can be reading and writing notes and stuff in your notebook as we go through it. We're just going to do a draft reading. And so remember, when we do draft readings, we use Post-it notes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be putting the Post-it notes on this thing. All right, so as we go through, I'm going to have you pause the video and do some work, and then come back, and then I will do the same work on the video. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is I'm going to go ahead and put you on my document camera. Here we go. There. All right, so here we go. Here is Salvador Late or Early. And the first thing I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you take a Post-it note or a piece of paper or whatever and just cover up that 3rd paragraph. And then I'm going to have you take another Post-it note and cover up the 2nd paragraph. Because what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this 1st paragraph first. All right? And I'm going to have you do this too. So if you want to pause the video, here's what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to just have you read this, and I want you to annotate for inference. Now I need to remind you about inference. Okay, if you have already done the voice thread, which you have, otherwise you have gone away and done that and come back, I want to remind you what that definition for inference is. All right, so I'm going to remind you because it's really important for you to have a clear understanding of the definition of inference, so then you know exactly what you're doing when you're inferring. Okay, so the definition that we ended up with at the end of the presentation, the voice thread presentation, was this: you are using your background knowledge and text evidence to figure out the author's ideas that are not stated in the text. If I were you, I would rewrite that in your notes right now. It only will help you remember it if you have this sort of repetitive thing. And if you do it again and again, you write that definition out again and again, and you're going to remember it, and then you're going to understand it better. So then when you are doing your application stuff, you will understand what you're supposed to be doing better. So I will repeat that definition. It's using background knowledge and text evidence to figure out the author's ideas that are not stated in the text. And that not stated in the text is a requirement for inference. If something is stated in the text, it cannot be an inference. Then the author's telling you that. Okay? So, for example, if I would have written down from our voice thread story, if I would have said, "Oh, I'm making an inference that her dog's name is Frankie." Well, that was stated in the text more than once, actually. So that's not an inference. That's just something that I told you as the author. Okay? So you have to make sure that you're reading very carefully and that you're labeling inferences as inferences, not taking something out of the text and saying, "Oh yeah, this is an inference," when it was already stated. Okay. All right. So we're going to get going here. You can pause this video, read this paragraph only, and annotate for inference, and then you can come back and see what I've done. Okay. So go ahead, pause, and then I will get started. All right. So Salvador, with eyes the color of caterpillar. Salvador, with the crooked hair and crooked teeth. Salvador, whose name the teacher cannot remember, is a boy who is no one's friend, runs along somewhere in that vague direction where homes are the color of bad weather, lives behind a raw wood doorway, shakes the sleepy brothers awake, ties their shoes, combs their hair with water, feeds them milk and cornflakes from a tin cup in the dim dark of the morning. All right, so right off the bat, this author, Sandra Cisneros, tells me that Salvador's eyes are the color of caterpillar. Now, caterpillar is not a color. So I'm going to have to make an inference here of what color his eyes are. And I know that some caterpillars are brown and some caterpillars are green. But I'm not sure exactly what color his eyes are because I would have to call Sandra Cisneros and say, "What color are Salvador's eyes?" Because she's only giving me a clue here by using the color of caterpillar. And she is saying, "Okay, Meg, use your background knowledge. What color are caterpillars?" Right? And there are brown eyes and there are green eyes. So either one of these may be right. And there's no way to know unless we ask the author. Okay? So there's my first inference. Salvador of the crooked hair and crooked teeth. Salvador, whose name the teacher cannot remember. So when a teacher cannot remember your name and you don't have very many friends, I'm thinking that this might mean that Salvador maybe he's shy or very quiet. Because when a teacher overlooks you, that just sort of means that you're not getting her attention. You're not raising your hand. You're not acting up in class, right? And it's very sad that some teachers don't make an effort to know all of their students, but I think that sometimes they don't. And those kids that the teachers don't remember very well, they might be just really shy and quiet. And same with somebody who doesn't have very many friends. It's hard to make friends if you're really shy and quiet. So that's why I'm thinking that he's very shy or quiet, just because of these two sentences here. She doesn't say that. She doesn't say, Salvador is very shy. Nope, she doesn't. So I have to infer that from her implication here. Runs along in that vague direction where homes are the color of bad weather. And here she's using a weird color again, because bad weather is not a color, right? But I also need you to think about the connotation of bad weather, all right? There could be a better way of saying the same color and put it on a more positive spin. So maybe if she said, and where the homes are a lovely charcoal gray, right? Then that's going to give you a different impression of what the houses look like. But since she uses the word bad weather, we already know that this doesn't look nice, right? We know that this must be a gray, dark, maybe dingy, right? Dank. That's the feeling that you get from bad weather. Okay, so that I'm thinking a dark gray, dingy, dank, disheveled house. Okay, lives behind a raw wood doorway. All right, so raw wood. What does that mean, raw wood? Well, if we're looking at my table here, my table is, it has been stained and finished. So it kind of looks shiny and it's smooth, right? I'm not going to get a sliver if I do this because it has some kind of veneer on it. So this is already finished. Also, you can paint wood and that would finish the wood too, right? If it was painted. So I am thinking that raw wood would be something like that you would go to like the lumber store and it would have zero paint, zero finish, just raw wood. And so you might get a sliver on your hand if you rubbed it, you know. So I'm thinking that most doorways, if you look at most houses, they have some paint or they're finished in some way. And so just the fact that it's not finished, and that compiled with that his home is the color of bad weather. And it says we're homes, so it's not just his home that's the color of bad weather, but all of them are. That makes me think that Salvador lives in poverty. Right? That just makes me think that it cannot be a very nice neighborhood. It looks disheveled, it looks run down, right? So that is what I'm getting from that line. Shakes the sleepy brothers awake, ties their shoes, combs their hair with water, feeds them milk and cornflakes from a tin cup in the dim dark of the morning. So I think that Salvador must be the oldest brother, and that he takes care of his younger brothers. Right? Because he gets, and he's getting them up, getting their shoes tied. That means they must be very little. If he, so the brothers must be little because he's combing their hair and tying their shoes for them. So the brothers must be very little. They haven't learned to tie their shoes yet, right? And then this whole tin cup thing, that also adds to my evidence that Salvador lives in poverty. it just says a tin cup. And so that just makes me feel, there's just something about it that makes me feel like he is poor and he's taking care of his siblings. All right, so that is what that's what I got. And so, oh, and I just want to write down this is unfinished. I didn't write that down. There we go. All right. And another thing that I also know about Salvador is that he's in school. Right? Otherwise, he wouldn't have a teacher if he wasn't in school. Right? He's in school, but he's easy to overlook. All right. I think that's it. I think I got it. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these annotations and I'm going to write what I know about Salvador. And this is not what is stated in the text. I'm going to write what I know based on what the author gave me and what I'm assuming, what I'm inferring. These are my inferences that I'm going to write. Okay? So Salvador lives in poverty. He takes care of his younger brothers. He is shy and easy to overlook. He goes to school. Yep. That's what I know about Salvador based on my annotations and my reading of that first paragraph. Okay, so now that I have that done, I'm going to rip it off and I'm going to look at the questions. So the very first question is, what can you infer? Is this paragraph 1? We just did paragraph 1. So what can you infer about Salvador from the first paragraph? Well, I did that on my Post-it note. So I'm just going to put my Post-it note here and I'm going to label it with paragraph 1 there so I know. But then it says, what connections do you have and what questions are in your head about Salvador? So this is another spot where you can pause the video and go ahead and write down what are your connections and what are your questions that you have about Salvador. Go ahead and do that and then come back and I'll tell you what mine are. Okay? All right. So my connections were, I had a text-to-text connection with the poverty packet. Right? I mean, even that tin cup full of cornflakes, that's not a very big breakfast for, I don't know. It just reminded me of the poverty packet. I also, when he was combing his hair with water, that was reminding me of shame. I had some flashbacks to that text as well. And then I had a text to world connection. I had to figure out what raw wood means. And the bad weather. And that is that equals a negative feeling that he lives in a dingy place. Oops. Dingy, dark, dank, disheveled. Right? So that's how I got to poverty right here. Right? Okay, so those were my connections. My questions, I had 3 questions. My first question is, how old is Salvador? Now, I know he goes to school, but how old is he? I mean, he has a lot of responsibility, right? Ah, that's something. He's responsible. I need to put that on my post-it note because that is another inference that I'm making, that he's responsible. He gets his brothers up and ready for the day. So I needed to have that down. Okay, so how old is Salvador is my first question. My second question is, where are his parents? And my third question is, why doesn't he have any friends? Okay, so those are my 3 questions. And those 3 questions are going to help me engage with the next paragraph. So it's really important to write down some questions. And now we go on to paragraph 2. So we're going to go on to paragraph 2, and here is my paragraph 2. I've uncovered it and put my other post-it note on this page. So now I'm back to our first page. And this is another spot where you can stop the video, go ahead, read the second paragraph, and do some annotations on what inferences you're making, and then write down what you know about Salvador based on what you read in the second paragraph, and then meet me back here and I will do mine for you. Okay? So go right ahead. Okay, so I'm going to read it first because I always do. Here we go. Salvador, late or early, sooner or later, arrives with the string of younger brothers ready, helps his mama who is busy with the business of the baby, tugs the arms of Cecilio and Arturito, makes them hurry because today, like yesterday, Arturito has dropped the cigar box of crayons, has let go the hundreds little fingers of red, green, yellow, blue, and nub of black sticks that tumble and spill over and beyond the asphalt puddles until the crossing guard lady holds back the blur of traffic for Salvador to collect them again. So beautiful. The language she uses is so beautiful. And this metaphor that she's using, the 100 little fingers of red for the crayons, gorgeous. Just really good. All right, so the first thing that I am noticing is that Salvador is walking. He walks his brothers to school. So that tells me that he probably goes to the same school. That makes sense, right? So he is saying that that he gets his brothers ready for school, right? Younger brother, they're ready. He gets them ready. And we know that from this paragraph up here. And then he helps his mama, who is busy with the business of the baby. Now, some people get hung up on the word business here, and they think maybe that the mother is running a daycare. But it just has one baby. It's the business of the baby. And so I think that she just had a baby. And so, like, this is a newborn. And that's why she needs so much help, because when you have a newborn, you are very busy and you need help. So he's helping her with the baby and by getting his younger brothers ready for school. Okay? And he tugs the arms of Cecilio and Arturito and makes them hurry, because today, like yesterday, this means that he walks them every day. At least I think so, because today, like yesterday, right? It's like every day this happens. Arturito's dropped his cigar box. And I want to talk to you about what a cigar box is. So when I was a little girl and I was going to school, I had a cigar box that I kept my um, school supplies in. And it was just a really heavy cardboard box. And then it had a lid, but the lid didn't come all the way off of the box. It just flipped up. And so, and this was exactly how cigar boxes used to be made. And I assume that before my time, people would actually take the cigar boxes from their parent and bring the cigar boxes home to school with them. But then by the time I was in school, they had cigar boxes in quotes, right? And they were decorated with cartoons, and they were for kids to buy and put their school supplies in. They don't latch. So if you dropped them, everything spelled out, and that happened a lot. You'd knock it off your desk and your supplies would go flying, and then everybody would help you put them all back in your box. So that tells me that Cecilio and Arturito are really little. Like they are probably his brothers are probably in kindergarten or first grade, right? And remember up here, he was tying their shoes and combing their hair for them. And now they have a cigar box full of crayons. So they're pretty little. They're in early elementary school, right? Okay. And then there's a crossing guard lady. So this seems to be an adult. So that just tells me um, that they're going to an elementary school. Okay. So what do I know about Salvador now? Well, I feel like if he's walking them to school and they're this little, that Salvador must be 10 or 11 years old, because he goes to school with them. He goes to school with his brothers. And if they're this little, K1, then the oldest he can be is probably 12, because if his school goes, if the elementary school goes through 6th grade, then you could be 12. But most of the time, elementary schools only go to 5th grade. So that's why I'm thinking he's 10 or 11, which is not very old to be in charge of your brothers and getting them out the door. I mean, I have a 16-year-old that has a difficult time getting out the door in the morning still. And so that's pretty responsible, right? And that's pretty young to be that responsible. But so that's something that I am inferring, and that he goes to school with his brothers, right? Who are much younger, right? I think that his mom just had a baby. and needs help. And that because of this, right, that Salvador and his brothers are on their own a little bit. Okay? So that is what I think. That is what I think. I'm inferring that from these two paragraphs. And I just want you to know that it says younger brother's ready here. I don't think I told you this. And that was my inference here, is he must be the older brother. He can take care of his younger brothers. And so now it's stated, right? So now this is no longer an inference. It was a prediction that was confirmed because it's stated. The author told me that they're younger brothers, right? Up here, I was like, oh, he must be the oldest. They must be his younger brothers, because she didn't tell us that here, but now she did. So now it's not an inference anymore. Does that make sense? Okay, so now let's, you can pause again, and you can answer what connections you had and what questions you have based on paragraph 2. And then you can come back and see what I say. All right, so again, what can you infer about Salvador on this paragraph? I already did that. This is paragraph 2. There we go. Done. So now, what connections do you have? Well, I'm making a text to world connection of how that they all go to elementary school. That has something to do with the crossing guard, because if you're going to high school, there's not a crossing guard. Adults don't stand outside and help you cross the street. It is assumed you already know how to do that, right? So that is a text to world connection that I'm making, because that's how elementary schools work, right? I also, let me just see here. Oh, I made a text to self connection with the cigar box, because I had one. And I remember having to clean up all of those spills. So I remember that. I'm also going to do a text to self here with a newborn baby. I remember when I had my oldest daughter, Sarah, she was 2, and I had twins, and I needed a lot of help from Sarah. Even though she was just 2, I would be like, Sarah, run and get me a diaper. And she would run into the other room and get a diaper. So she was very helpful even when she was 2 years old, because I needed a lot of help because I had 2 newborn babies. But I know how that feels. So when it said helps his mama who is busy with the business of the baby, that is a tough text to self connection there. I also have a text to self. Oh, I have another one. I'm going to try and squish it here. Text to self, because I used to teach elementary school. Right? So I am like connecting to these kids that are going into the to the elementary school, because I know what that's like. I used to work in an elementary school, so I know how that feels and what that looks like. So I'm making that text to self connection. So I had quite a few text to self connections here, and a text to world about the, how elementary schools work. So those were my connections. my question is, where is Salvador? Salvador's dad, right? Uh, yeah, I'm thinking, and I just kind of want to know, how old is the baby? Because I'm not sure. Maybe the baby's a newborn, maybe not. I would just like to know. So those are my two questions. The other ones, I don't have very many questions for this one. So, all right. So there we go for paragraph 2, and now we're going to go back, and I have one more paragraph. It's a longer paragraph, it looks like, and so I am going to stick a sticky note just to the bottom here so I can move it when we're done. No, I guess I don't need to have that. I can stick it under here as well. I'll stick it. That's fine. Okay, so now's the time where you can pause the video and you can go and annotate the last paragraph and write down your inference on your post-it note, and then come back and see what I've got for you. Okay? All right, so off you go. All right. So, Salvador, inside that wrinkled shirt, inside that throat that must clear itself and apologize each time it speaks, inside that 40-pound body of boy with its geography of scars, its history of hurt, limbs stuffed with feathers and rags, in what part of the eyes, in what part of the heart, in that cage of the chest where something throbs with both fists and knows only what Salvador knows, inside that body too small to contain the 100 balloons of happiness, the single guitar of grief, is a boy like any other, disappearing out the door beside the schoolyard gate where he has told his brothers they must wait, collects the hands of Cecilio and Arturito, scuttles off, dodging the many schoolyard colors, the elbows and wrists crisscrossing, the several shoes running, grows small and smaller to the eye, dissolves into the bright horizon, flutters in the air before disappearing like the memory of kites. Okay, so here we are at the end of our essay here. And the first thing that really came out to me was the throat that must clear itself and apologize each time it speaks. So this is interesting to me because up here I had said he's shy and quiet, right? And with shy, quiet people, a lot of times they feel like they're interrupting when they just talk. So this reinforces that inference that he's shy and quiet. But then down here, it says that 40-pound body of boy with its geography of scars. So I want you to think about the word geography, okay? Geography. And what do you study when you study geography? I believe that is a study of places around the world, right? And in order to study those places, you have to put them on a map. So this is one of my very favorite metaphors. I just think it's a beautiful metaphor. And you can see a map, right? Picture a map in your head, and you can see all of the rivers and all of the borders and all of the mountain ranges, right? And you can see what that looks like. So the geography of scars So this tells me that Salvador might be a victim of abuse. He might be really clumsy too. But because it says the geography of scars, and if you think of a map and think of how a map would look on a child's body, I'm making the inference that he might be a victim of abuse. Okay? I also am looking at 40-pound body. That's not very much. So I'm thinking that, yeah, he might be in 5th grade. He certainly hasn't gone through puberty yet, right? And in 6th grade, you know, some boys their voices start to change. They might start putting on more weight. So I'm going to just solidify my inference as 5th grader, 10 or 11 years old, right? And then it says it's history of hurt right here, which goes back to this being a victim, right? And then if he is scared of drawing attention to himself because he is a victim of abuse, that makes sense why he's really quiet and is easily overlooked. Because when you have an abusive parent, for example, you do want to not get their attention because you don't want to, get hurt. So that makes sense. I am not sure what it means when she says limbs stuffed with feathers and rags. I don't know. I don't really have a good inference for that. If you do, I hope that you will email me and tell me what you think that means, because I've never figured that out. Limbs stuffed with feathers and rags. It might just mean that he's really skinny, but I don't know. That doesn't even, and that's just a wild guess. I don't have any textual evidence to figure that out. In what part of the eyes, in what part of the heart, in that cage of the chest. So the cage of the chest is his rib cage, right? Which holds his heart. Where something throbs with both fists, that's his heart, I think. And knows only what Salvador knows. Inside that body, too small to contain the 100 balloons of happiness. So too small to contain means that he can't keep it inside. So I'm thinking that maybe he's happy. Right? Too small to contain the 100 balloons of happiness, the single guitar of grief. All right, so he's sad. So to put those together, maybe he shows his emotion. Right? His body can't contain his emotions, so he shows them. And that means he's a boy like any other, disappearing out the door beside the schoolyard gate. So school must be over now. Right? And he told his brothers they had to wait, and he collects their hands, and they scuttle off, dodging the many schoolyard colors. And so you can see them, they're running. Right? Oh, wait, Shu's running. So that's not an inference anymore, right? That's not an inference because she told us that right there. So that's already stated, right? Grows small and smaller to the eye, development, blah, 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 right? Disappearing like that. So I think that they're running home. Right? So it starts out when they wake up for school, they go to school, and then it ends when they get out of school. That's the arc of this essay. Okay. So what do I know about Salvador now? Salvador might be a victim of abuse. He shows his emotions and seems happy to be running home with his brothers. Okay. You couldn't see any of that, but there it is. Okay. All right, so there's my inference. So we're going to go back to here, and it says paragraph 3. Okay. I may have answered this already, but you might want to just try it on your own. The first question is, why does Sandra Cisneros describe Salvador inside the throat that must clear itself and apologize each time it speaks? What is she trying to say about him? I think that I already went over that, but if you'd like to write that down on your paper, you can. And then it says, what else can you infer about Salvador? Ta-da, I did that already, right? And then what connections do you have? So you can stop the video and answer the connections. You can answer what questions are in your head. And then you can give this a stab. What is the author's purpose for writing this passage? And remember, there's only 3. Easy as pie, right? And what is her main idea? And if you want extra credit, you can say the mode of discourse too. That's spelled wrong. Good night. Ugh. Okay. You can do that too. And when I say extra credit, I mean for your own self, because you're not handing this in. So, but if you want to think about it, that'd be good. So go ahead, get this done, and then come back and I will go over the rest with you. All right, so my connections. I have a text to self connection with elementary school. I used to walk, and so I remember running home. And how you just felt like you're free. I just remember that. And that's sort of what it reminds me of, that paragraph. Didn't have siblings. I think a text to world about geography and maps. And that helped me make that inference about abuse. Text to world about 40 pounds of a kid. And that helped me. It helped, oh my gosh. Helped me, there we go. It helped me infer his age. What other connections? Oh, yeah, I have text to text because I took anatomy, so I know about the rib cage and the heart, right? I've read about that before, so I know about that. Yep, I think that's it. I think that's all of my connections. And my question that didn't get answered is, Where's his dad? And who is the abuser? Clearly, his dad isn't completely out of the picture, possibly, because his mom just had a baby. So I don't know. Let's see. Like, right? Not sure. So those are my biggest questions. Author's purpose. Is Sandra Cisneros trying to convince us of anything? I don't think so. Inform us of anything? Maybe. Could be inform about Salvador. Could be entertain. It's just a wonderfully written. And it's from a book of short stories. So that was sold, right? So it could be entertain. Mode of discourse. Narrative. With a lot of description. Okay. Main idea. So what is the thesis? Well, we need a topic, which is Salvador. And we need a controlling idea. And so it tells all about Salvador. So a day in his life, right? What his life is like, what Salvador is like. And so then a thesis would be, I wish that I knew that you couldn't see this. Okay, there. So the topic is Salvador, controlling ideas, a day in his life. So the thesis would be in Salvador, late or early, by Sandra. I have to look how to spell her name. Hold on. By Sandra Cisneros. Maybe I'd like to say no by Sandra Cisneros. Just wordsmithing here. In Salvador, late or early, Sandra Cisneros tells us I'm not even going to say tells us, I'm going to say invites us. Invites us to get to know Salvador. A responsible child, but like any other kid. Okay? Right? That's basically what she's saying, is that he's just like everybody else. Here's a day in his life. He's helping his brothers. He's helping his mom. Excuse me. he's going to school, and when he gets out of school, he runs home and he's happy and sad and just like any other child, right? So maybe this probably doesn't need to be there. That's a responsible child, but he's just like any other kid. And that is stated. Where is it? Is a boy like any other? There it is, right there. Is a boy like any other? Right here. Right? Okay. So there's that. I hope that helped you figure out how to read and hello, hi. I hope that helped you learn how to read and infer from the clues that authors use in order for you to get the ideas that they want you to get that they're not stating directly. Okay. Let me know if you have questions. We can Zoom. We can set up an appointment to Zoom with me if you need to. Next week, we'll be doing a little bit more practice, so we're not done with practicing yet. But I hope that this was helpful, and have a wonderful rest of your day.